"It's law now," she said, then dragged the human to fulfill her daily joy. Captain Jake Morrison had been fixing the atmospheric recycler in Sector 7 when the purple-skinned alien appeared in his doorway. Her presence was so sudden and commanding that he nearly dropped his plasma wrench into the machinery. "Human Morrison," she announced, her voice carrying an otherworldly melody that made his spine tingle. "I am Zephyra of the Valerian Council. You have been selected for mandatory emotional compliance under the new interspecies treaty." Jake stared at her, taking in her ethereal beauty. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that shimmered like amethyst in the dim light of the maintenance bay. Her hair flowed like liquid starlight, and her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. She wore a form-fitting suit that appeared to be made of living metal, shifting colors as she moved. "I'm sorry, what now?" Jake asked, wiping grease from his hands with a dirty rag. "Emotional compliance? That sounds like something out of a bad science fiction novel." Zephyra stepped closer, her presence filling the small space. "The treaty between your species and mine requires specific interactions. Your emotional energy is needed to sustain my people's well-being. It is now law." Jake had heard rumors about the treaty, of course. Everyone had. After the Valerian ships had appeared in Earth's orbit 3 months ago, negotiations had been swift and mysterious. The government had announced a peaceful resolution, but details had been scarce. Most people assumed it involved trade agreements or scientific exchanges. "So what exactly are we talking about here?" Jake asked, his engineer's mind already analyzing the situation. "Are you saying I have to provide some kind of emotional service?" "Precisely." Zephyra's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Your species possesses a unique emotional resonance that my people require for survival. Without regular exposure to human emotional energy, we weaken and eventually perish." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "And if I refuse?" "Refusal is not an option." Her voice remained melodic, but there was steel beneath the music. "The treaty is binding. Your compliance ensures the continued peace between our worlds." The implications hit Jake like a meteor. Humanity hadn't won the negotiation at all. They had essentially been drafted into emotional servitude. The Valerians needed them, and Earth had little choice but to comply. "How does this work exactly?" he asked, setting down his tools. "Do I just talk to you? Share my feelings?" Zephyra moved closer, close enough that Jake could smell her alien scent, something like ozone and starflowers. "The process is more intimate than mere conversation. I must experience your emotions directly, feel them as you feel them." Jake's heart rate increased. "That sounds invasive. It is necessary." She reached out and placed a hand on his chest, just above his heart. The touch sent electric shocks through his nervous system. "Your fear is already beginning to nourish me. But we need deeper emotions, joy, passion, wonder, even anger. These sustain us." Jake felt trapped, but also strangely curious. As an engineer, he was fascinated by the alien technology that might be involved. As a human, he was terrified of being used as some kind of emotional battery. "How long does this last?" he asked. "The initial session requires 4 hours. After that, we will meet daily for maintenance sessions of 1 hour each." Zephyra's hand remained on his chest, and Jake could feel something changing in his body chemistry. "Your cooperation will be rewarded. Resistance will be unpleasant." Jake looked around his small maintenance bay, the only space he had ever truly called his own. The recycler hummed quietly, its repairs half finished. His tools lay scattered on the workbench, each one carefully maintained and perfectly organized. This was his world, his domain of logic and mechanical certainty. Now an alien goddess was telling him that world was about to change forever. "Do I have any say in how this happens? He asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Sapphira's expression shifted, showing something that might have been approval. Your willingness to engage rather than simply submit is refreshing. Yes, we can negotiate the parameters of our arrangement. Then let's talk, Jake said, straightening his shoulders. If I'm going to be your emotional fuel source, I want to understand exactly what I'm getting into. Zephyra guided Jake to a section of the space station he had never seen before. The corridors here were wider, with walls that seemed to pulse with soft, bioluminescent light. Other humans walked past them, most looking dazed or confused, accompanied by various Valerian escorts. This is the Harmony Sector, Zephyr explained as they walked, specially designed for optimal emotional resonance between our species. They entered a chamber that took Jake's breath away. The room was circular, with walls that appeared to be made of living crystal. Soft music played from no visible source, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with energy. In the center stood a platform surrounded by floating, glowing orbs. This is where we will conduct your sessions, Zephyra said, her voice echoing strangely in the space. The environment is designed to amplify and focus emotional energy. Jake approached the platform cautiously. And you're going to what, exactly? Read my mind? Nothing so invasive. Zephyra moved to stand beside him, her presence both comforting and overwhelming. I will simply experience your emotions alongside you. Think of it as a form of empathic sharing. She gestured to the floating orbs. These devices will monitor and channel the emotional energy. They ensure the process is safe for both of us. Jake studied the alien technology with professional interest. How do they work? Your species would call it a form of bioelectric field manipulation, Zephyr explained. They read the electrical patterns in your brain and nervous system that correspond to emotional states. And then I absorb that energy through direct contact. She held out her hand, palm up. We must maintain physical connection throughout the process. Jake hesitated. The rational part of his mind was screaming warnings, but another part, the part that had always been drawn to the unknown, was intensely curious. He had spent his entire career working with machines, understanding how they functioned. This was technology beyond anything humans had ever developed. What happens to me during this process? He asked. You will experience your emotions more intensely than usual, Zephyr admitted. The amplification effect works both ways. Some humans find it overwhelming at first, and if I can't handle it, then we will stop. Her alien eyes met his. I have no desire to harm you, Jake Morrison. Your well-being is essential to my survival. Jake considered this. At least she was being honest about the mutual dependence. What kind of emotions work best? Positive emotions provide the most sustainable energy, Zephyr said. Joy, wonder, love, excitement. But negative emotions can also be powerful. Fear, anger, sadness. The key is intensity and authenticity. So I need to feel things strongly, precisely. She stepped onto the platform and gestured for him to follow. Are you ready to begin? Jake joined her on the platform and immediately felt the energy in the room shift. The floating orbs began to glow brighter, and he could feel a subtle tingling in his skin. Place your hand in mine, Zephyr instructed. The moment their palms touched, Jake felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Every nerve in his body came alive, and his emotions suddenly became vivid and overwhelming. He could feel his curiosity intensifying, along with his fear and wonder. Remarkable, Zephyr breathed, her eyes beginning to glow with the same light as the orbs. Your emotional spectrum is incredibly rich. Jake could barely speak through the intensity of the sensations. Is this normal? Far from it. Zephyra's grip tightened. Most humans provide a steady, predictable flow of energy. Yours is like a star, brilliant and complex. The connection deepened, and Jake began to feel something extraordinary. He could sense Zephyr's emotions alongside his own, her hunger for the energy he was providing, her amazement at his intensity, and underneath it all, a profound loneliness that made his heart ache. "How long have you been without this?" he asked, somehow knowing the answer would be painful. "Months," she whispered. "Since before we arrived at Earth, my people have been slowly dying from emotional starvation." The admission hit Jake like a physical blow. These weren't conquerors or parasites. They were refugees, desperately seeking something they needed. To survive, the treaty wasn't about dominance. It was about mutual survival. "Why didn't you just explain this to us from the beginning?" he asked. "Would your species have willingly entered into such an arrangement?" Zephyr's question was rhetorical. Humans are naturally suspicious of intimate contact with aliens. She was right, of course. The idea of emotional sharing would have been met with fear and resistance. But experiencing it directly, Jake was beginning to understand that it wasn't violation, it was connection. The emotional connection between Jake and Zephyr continued to intensify over the following days. Each session revealed new depths to their bond, and Jake found himself looking forward to their meetings with an anticipation that surprised him. "You're different from the other humans I've worked with," Zephyr admitted during their 5th session. They were sitting together on the platform, hands clasped as energy flowed between them. "Different how?" Jake asked, though he could feel the answer in the emotional currents that connected them. "More responsive, more willing to explore the deeper aspects of the connection." Her alien features showed something that might have been affection. Most humans fight the process, try to maintain emotional distance. You embrace it. Jake considered this. "I'm an engineer. I like to understand how things work. This is just another system to analyze and optimize." "Is that all this is to you?" Zephyr asked. "A system to be optimized?" The question caught Jake off guard. Over the past few days, he had begun to feel something for the alien woman that went beyond professional curiosity. The emotional sharing had created a bond between them that felt almost intimate. "No," he admitted, "it's become something more." Through their connection, he could feel Zephyr's satisfaction at his honesty. But there was also something else, a sadness that ran deeper than her species' need for emotional energy. "What aren't you telling me?" Jake asked. Zephyr was quiet for a long moment. "The treaty has a time limit," she finally said. 1 year. After that, we must move on to find other sources of emotional energy." "Move on? What does that mean?" "It means we leave Earth and never return." Her grip on his hand tightened. "The bond we formed, it will be severed permanently." Jake felt a shock of loss. It was so intense, it made him gasp. The idea of never seeing Zephyr again, never feeling their connection, was unbearable. "There has to be another way," he said. "What if some humans chose to come with you?" "Impossible." Zephyr's voice was firm. "The treaty specifically forbids the relocation of humans. Your species must remain on Earth." "Then what if some of your people stayed here?" "We cannot survive indefinitely on a single planet's emotional energy," she explained. "We require diversity, new experiences, different emotional spectrums. One world, no matter how rich, will eventually become insufficient." Jake felt his engineer's mind working on the problem. What if we could find a way to intensify the emotional connection? Make it more efficient? "You think like a human," Zephyr said with something that might have been amusement. "Always seeking technological solutions to emotional problems." "It's worked so far," Jake pointed out. "The amplification system in this room, that's technology applied to emotion. Why couldn't we develop something better?" Zephyr's alien eyes studied him with new interest. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we work together to create a more permanent solution." Jake's excitement was growing, and he could feel it flowing through their connection. Your people understand the emotional energy requirements. My people understand engineering and system optimization. Together, we might be able to develop something that works for both species. A hybrid technology, Zephyra mused, combining Valerian emotional science with human engineering. Exactly. Instead of your people moving from world to world, we create a network. A system that connects different worlds, different species, allowing for emotional exchange across vast distances. The idea was ambitious, probably impossible, but Jake could feel Zephyra's excitement matching his own. Through their connection, he sensed her mind working through the possibilities. It would require unprecedented cooperation between our species, she said slowly, and technologies that don't yet exist. But it's possible? Theoretically, yes. Zephyra's voice was thoughtful. But it would require individuals from both species willing to form permanent bonds. Deep, lasting connections that could maintain the network. Jake felt his heart race. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you would be willing to be the first, Zephyra said simply. To form a permanent emotional bond with me? To become the prototype for a new form of interspecies cooperation. The magnitude of what she was proposing hit Jake like a wave. It would mean giving up his human life as he knew it, becoming something new, something unprecedented. But as he looked into Zephyra's alien eyes, felt the depth of their connection, he realized he had already made his choice. Yes, he said without hesitation. Let's build something new together. The proposal to create a permanent emotional network between species was met with skepticism from both human and Valerian authorities. Jake found himself standing in a council chamber filled with representatives from both worlds, trying to explain a concept that had never been attempted. You're asking us to fundamentally alter the terms of the treaty, said Director Walsh, the human negotiator who had originally signed the agreement. Based on the untested theory of one maintenance engineer. With respect, Director, Jake replied, his confidence growing stronger with each word. I'm not just theorizing. I've been living this connection for weeks. I know what's possible. Beside him, Zephyra stood with regal composure, her alien presence commanding attention, even in the formal council chamber. The human Morrison speaks truth, she said. The emotional resonance we have achieved exceeds anything previously recorded between our species. The Valerian council members exchanged glances that Jake was beginning to recognize as their equivalent of surprise. Their leader, a tall figure with skin like polished obsidian, stepped forward. Zephyra of the seventh house, the leader said, you propose to bind yourself permanently to a single human. This goes against every principle of our species' survival strategy. Sometimes survival requires evolution, Zephyra replied calmly. Our current method of moving from world to world, depleting emotional resources and moving on, is ultimately unsustainable. We need a better way. Jake felt the weight of both species' attention on him. The network I'm proposing wouldn't just solve the Valerian energy crisis, he continued. It would create something unprecedented, a true partnership between species. Humans would gain access to Valerian emotional amplification technology, which could revolutionize everything from mental health treatment to artistic expression. And the Valerians would gain a stable, renewable source of emotional energy, Zephyra added. No more exodus from dying worlds. No more desperate searches for new sources of sustenance. Director Walsh leaned forward. What exactly would this network look like? Jake activated the holographic display he had prepared. Imagine a series of connected nodes, each one anchored by a permanently bonded human Valerian pair. These couples would serve as conduits, allowing emotional energy to flow between different worlds, different species, different individuals. The hologram showed a web of light connecting various planets, with pulsing energy flowing along the connections. The beauty of the system is its scalability. We start with a few prototype pairs, prove the concept works, then gradually expand the network. And the risks? Asked the Valerian leader. Significant, Jake admitted. We're talking about permanent psychological and physiological changes for both species. The bonded pairs would become something new, not quite human, not quite Valerian, but something in between. A hybrid consciousness, Zephyr said. We would maintain our individual identities while sharing a deeper connection than either species has ever experienced. A chamber fell silent as both councils considered the implications. Jake could feel the tension in the air, the weight of a decision that would affect the future of both civilizations. There's something else, Jake said, breaking the silence. The emotional amplification effect works both ways. Through my connection with Zephyr, I've experienced cognitive enhancements that I never thought possible. Increased creativity, enhanced problem-solving abilities, expanded empathy and understanding. You're suggesting that bonded humans would become more than human, Director Walsh said slowly. I'm suggesting that both species would become more than they are alone, Jake corrected. The partnership would be genuinely symbiotic, not parasitic. The Valerian leader approached Jake and Zephyr, studying them with ancient eyes. Demonstrate this enhanced connection, the leader commanded. Jake looked at Zephyr, and she nodded. They joined hands, and immediately the familiar energy began to flow between them. But this time, instead of containing it, they allowed it to expand, to fill the chamber with visible light. The assembled representatives gasped as the air itself began to shimmer with emotional energy. Jake could feel every person in the room, their fears, their hopes, their wonder at what they were witnessing. Through Zephyr, he could sense the deep longing of the Valerian Council, their desperation masked by diplomatic composure. This is what we offer, Jake said, his voice carrying new harmonics that resonated with both human and Valerian hearing. Not just survival, but transcendence. Not just coexistence, but true unity. The demonstration lasted only minutes, but Jake could see that it had changed something fundamental in the room. The skepticism was still there, but it was now mixed with genuine possibility. The proposal has merit, the Valerian leader finally said, but it would require volunteers from both species willing to undergo irreversible transformation. We volunteer, Jake and Zephyr said simultaneously, their voices perfectly synchronized. Director Walsh shook his head. One pair isn't enough to prove the concept. You'd need at least a dozen bonded couples to create a stable network. Then we find them, Jake said with determination. We recruit individuals from both species who are willing to take the risk for the potential reward. And if the experiment fails? Asked a Valerian council member. Then we learn from the failure and try again, Zephyr replied. The alternative is eventual extinction for my people and eternal isolation for yours. The councils exchanged glances, and Jake could feel the momentum shifting. What had started as a desperate proposal was beginning to look like a genuine possibility. We will need extensive testing, Director Walsh said slowly. Psychological evaluations, physiological monitoring, safeguards against potential abuse. Agreed, said the Valerian leader. And volunteers from both species must be fully informed of the risks and consequences. Jake felt a surge of hope. So, you're willing to approve a pilot program? A limited trial, Director Walsh corrected. 12 bonded pairs, closely monitored, with the option to terminate the experiment if negative effects are observed. The future of both our species may depend on this, the Valerian leader added solemnly. Choose your volunteers carefully. Jake squeezed Zephyr's hand, feeling their connection pulse with shared determination. They had won the first battle, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months later, Jake stood in the command center of the first Emotional Resonance Network hub, watching data streams flow across holographic displays. The pilot program had exceeded everyone's expectations. 12 human Valerian pairs had successfully bonded, creating a network that spanned 3 solar systems. Network efficiency is at 97%, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project's lead scientist. She was one of the bonded humans, her partner being a Valerian named Cathara. The changes in Elena were remarkable. Her already brilliant mind had become even sharper, her intuition enhanced to almost supernatural levels. And the emotional stability indices? Jake asked, though he could already sense the answer through the network connection. All pairs are showing optimal psychological integration, Elena replied. The hybrid consciousness is stabilizing beautifully. Jake nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction that resonated through the network to all the other bonded pairs. They had created something unprecedented, a true merger of 2 species that benefited both. Zephyra materialized beside him, her form shimmering as she used the network to project her consciousness across space. She was currently on the Valerian homeworld, helping to establish the network's primary hub there. The Council of Worlds has approved the network expansion, she reported, her voice carrying joy that Jake felt as if it were his own. We're authorized to recruit an additional 50 pairs. Volunteers are already lining up, Jake said, gesturing to the communication logs. Humans and Valerians both. The success stories are spreading. Through the network, Jake could sense the experiences of all the bonded pairs. Marcus and Valdris, exploring the philosophical implications of shared consciousness. Sarah and Nithara, using their enhanced abilities to develop new art forms that neither species could create alone. Tom and Xylera, pushing the boundaries of awe. Scientific research through their combined perspectives. Each pair was unique, yet all were connected through the network. Individual identity remained intact, but was enhanced by the greater whole. It was evolution in action, guided by choice rather than chance. There's something else, Zephyra said, her expression showing the excitement that Jake could feel through. Their bond. The network is beginning to show emergent properties, capabilities we never anticipated. What kind of capabilities? Long-range communication without technological assistance. Shared problem-solving across impossible distances. And something the researchers are calling collective intuition, the ability to sense solutions to problems that no individual could solve alone. Jake felt a thrill of wonder. We're becoming more than the sum of our parts. Much more, Zephyra agreed. The network is developing its own form of consciousness, not replacing our individual minds, but connecting them in ways that create new possibilities. As if responding to their conversation, the network pulsed with a wave of shared awareness. For a moment, Jake could perceive through the senses of all the bonded pairs simultaneously, seeing distant worlds, feeling alien emotions, thinking thoughts that spanned multiple consciousness. It's beautiful, he whispered. It's the future, Zephyra replied. Not just for humans and Valerians, but for any species willing to join the network. Jake looked at the star charts, showing the network's planned expansion. Other species had begun to express interest. The crystalline Zephyrite, the aquatic Nereidans, the energy-based Luminari. Each would bring their own unique perspectives and abilities to the growing collective. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't chosen me for that first session, Jake mused. I didn't choose you, Zephyra said softly. The network did. It was always meant to be. Jake felt the truth of her words resonate through their connection. The network hadn't been built by them. They had been instruments in its creation, guided by forces they were only beginning to understand. Where do we go from here? He asked. Everywhere, Zephyra replied, her consciousness merging briefly with his own. The network is growing, learning, becoming something that will eventually span galaxies. We're not just building a communication system. We're creating a new form of life. Through the network, Jake could sense the vast potential of what they had started. Civilizations that had never met would be connected. Problems that had seemed insurmountable would be solved through collective intelligence. Wars would become impossible when former enemies could feel each other's emotions directly. "It's going to change everything," he said. "It already has," Zephyra pointed out. "Look at us. 6 months ago, we were strangers from different worlds. Now we're partners in the greatest adventure in galactic history." Jake smiled, feeling the love and partnership that flowed between them, amplified by the network, and reflected back through dozens of other bonded pairs. They had started as two lonely individuals brought together by necessity. Now they were part of something magnificent and eternal. "Are you ready for the next phase?" Zephyra asked. "Always," Jake replied, taking her hand and feeling the network pulse with shared determination. "Let's build a better universe." The future stretched before them, infinite with possibility. The network would grow, connecting species after species, world after world, consciousness after consciousness. And at its heart would always be the simple truth that had started it all: that connection is stronger than isolation, that unity is more powerful than division, and that love, in all its forms, is the force that binds the universe together. Together, they stepped into tomorrow, ready to guide the network toward its ultimate destiny. A galaxy united, not by conquest or treaty, but by the willing choice to share in something greater than themselves. The age of isolation was over. The age of connection had begun.